I never thought I'd find love again after my wife died, especially not when my friend set me up on what I thought was a cruel joke. But sometimes, the universe has other plans, and sometimes those plans come in the form of a woman who can't speak or walk, but whose soul speaks volumes. If you're touched by this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more real stories that remind us what it means to be human. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful moments that often go untold. The rain pelted against the windshield as Mark Reynolds gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white with tension. He was already 15 minutes late for this blind date his friends had arranged, and the weather wasn't helping his mood. At 38, with a 10-year-old daughter waiting at home with a babysitter, he questioned why he had agreed to this in the first place. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself, pulling into the restaurant parking lot. "I should be home with Emma, not wasting time on another awkward date." It had been 3 years since cancer took his wife, Sarah. 3 years of raising their daughter alone, of working overtime at his construction company to provide for her, of falling into bed exhausted each night with barely enough energy to process his grief, let alone consider dating again. His friends, however, had other ideas. Particularly Dave and Melissa, who had been relentless in their mission to get Mark back out there. This dinner was their latest scheme, and he had finally relented just to get them off his back. "You'll love her," Melissa had insisted. "She's beautiful, smart, and has the kindest heart." What Melissa hadn't mentioned, what none of them had mentioned, was that the woman was deaf and paralyzed from the waist down. Mark spotted her immediately upon entering the restaurant. She sat alone at a corner table, her wheelchair positioned discreetly beside her. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves around a face that, even from a distance, struck him as remarkably serene. She was reading a book, her slender fingers turning the pages with practiced ease. A wave of anger washed over him. Was this some kind of sick joke? Had his friends set him up with a disabled woman as some sort of pity date? Or worse, did they think this was all he could aspire to now, damaged goods for damaged goods? He considered walking out. It would be easy to text an excuse later. Car trouble. Work emergency. Anything. But as he stood there, the woman looked up and caught his eye. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes, and something in Mark's chest tightened. Before he could reconsider, his feet were carrying him toward her table. "Hi," he said awkwardly, standing before her. "I'm Mark. I think we're supposed to meet tonight." The woman nodded and reached for a tablet on the table. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen, and then she turned it toward him. "Hello, Mark. I'm Eliza. It's nice to meet you. I hope you don't mind that I can't speak verbally. I was born deaf, and a car accident 5 years ago left me paralyzed from the waist down, *. Mark read the words, a mixture of emotions churning inside him. Embarrassment at his initial reaction. Anger at his friends for not preparing him. And something else, a grudging respect for this woman's straightforward approach. No, I don't mind," he said, remembering to face her directly so she could read his lips. "I just wish someone had told me beforehand." Eliza typed again, *, "They didn't tell you? I'm sorry. That wasn't fair to either of us. If you want to leave, I completely understand, *. There was no self-pity in her message, just a simple acknowledgement of reality. Mark hesitated, then pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "I'm already here," he said. "And I'm starving. Might as well have dinner." Eliza's smile returned, smaller this time but no less genuine. She typed, "Great. I recommend the pasta primavera. It's my favorite, *. Dinner was awkward at first. Mark had never communicated with someone who couldn't hear or speak, and the tablet created a natural delay in their conversation. But as the meal progressed, he found himself relaxing. Eliza was patient, her responses thoughtful and often laced with unexpected humor. "So you build houses," she typed after he mentioned his construction business. Asterisk, that's impressive. I can barely put together IKEA furniture without it looking like abstract art, asterisk. Mark laughed despite himself. What about you? What do you do? I'm a children's book illustrator, she responded. I work from home, which is convenient given everything. She gestured vaguely at herself, and Mark nodded, unsure how to respond. Tell me about your daughter, Eliza typed, changing the subject smoothly. Mark's face softened immediately. Emma? She's amazing. 10 years old and smarter than I'll ever be. She's into science right now, wants to be a marine biologist. Asterisk, that's wonderful. I loved marine biology as a kid too. Does she have a favorite sea creature? Asterisk. Octopuses, Mark replied. She thinks they're the smartest animals in the ocean. Asterisk, she's right. They're incredible problem solvers. I illustrated a children's book about an octopus last year, asterisk. The conversation flowed more easily after that. Mark found himself talking about Emma, about his late wife, about the challenges of single parenthood, things he rarely discussed with anyone. Eliza listened, or rather, read, with an attentiveness that made him feel truly heard for the first time in years. By the time they finished dessert, Mark was surprised to realize 3 hours had passed. As they prepared to leave, he felt a strange reluctance to end the evening. Can I walk you to your car? He asked. Eliza typed, asterisk, I took a rideshare here. I don't drive anymore, asterisk. Oh, Mark said, feeling foolish. Of course. I can give you a ride home, if you'd like. She hesitated, then typed, that would be nice, thank you. The process of helping Eliza into his truck was more complicated than Mark had anticipated. Her wheelchair needed to be folded and stored in the back, and she required assistance transferring from the chair to the passenger seat. Mark tried to be respectful, following her typed instructions carefully, but he couldn't help feeling awkward. I'm sorry if I'm doing this wrong, he said as he finally settled into the driver's seat. Eliza shook her head and typed, asterisk, you did fine. Better than most first-timers. Thank you for not making a big deal of it, asterisk. As they drove through the rain-slicked streets, Mark found himself stealing glances at her profile. In the dim light of passing street lamps, her face looked younger, more vulnerable. He wondered about the accident that had changed her life, but didn't know how to ask. As if reading his thoughts, Eliza began typing. He could see the glow of her screen from the corner of his eye. Asterisk, it was a rainy night like this. I was driving home from a friend's house. The other driver was texting. He ran a red light. I don't remember the impact, just waking up in the hospital 2 days later, asterisk. Mark swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Asterisk, it was 5 years ago. I've had time to adjust. Some days are harder than others, but I'm still here. Still living, asterisk. They arrived at her apartment building, a modern complex with wheelchair accessibility. Mark helped her back into her chair and walked her to the entrance. I had a nice time tonight, he said, surprising himself with his sincerity. Eliza smiled and typed, asterisk, so did I. Thank you for staying, even after the surprise, asterisk. Mark hesitated, then said, would it be okay if I called you sometime? Maybe we could do this again. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Mark regretted the question. But then she typed, asterisk, I'd like that. But Mark. I need to know this isn't about pity, asterisk. The directness of her words caught him off guard. It's not, he said, and realized he meant it. I enjoyed talking with you. You're easy to talk to. Even though it takes me 3 times as long to respond. Maybe because of that, he admitted. It gives me time to think. I'm not great at conversations usually. Eliza's smile returned, and she typed one last message before entering her building, asterisk, good night, Mark. I'm glad your friends tricked you into having dinner with me, asterisk. When Mark arrived home, the babysitter reported that Emma had gone to bed without complaint, a rare occurrence. He paid her, then checked on his daughter, who was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed octopus clutched to her chest. He sat on the edge of her bed, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. She looked so much like Sarah sometimes that it hurt. The same determined chin, the same long eyelashes. I met someone tonight, Em, he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear him. She's different from anyone I've ever known. I'm not sure what to think about it. His phone buzzed with a text from Dave, asterisk how'd it go with Eliza? Before you get mad, hear me out. We didn't tell you about her situation because we knew you'd never go if we did. But she's amazing, right, asterisk. Mark stared at the message, his initial anger resurfacing. But beneath it was something else, a reluctant acknowledgement that Dave wasn't entirely wrong. He would have declined the date had he known. And he would have missed out on meeting someone who, despite everything, had intrigued him. He typed back, asterisk we'll talk about your methods later. But yes, she's interesting, asterisk. Dave's response came immediately, asterisk that's Mark speak for, I like her. Knew it, asterisk. Mark put his phone away without responding. He wasn't ready to admit anything yet, not even to himself. Over the next few weeks, Mark and Eliza began seeing each other regularly. Their second date was at an art gallery featuring children's book illustrations, including some of Eliza's work. Mark was impressed by her talent, vibrant, whimsical drawings that seemed to capture the essence of childhood imagination. Their third date was a picnic in the park, where Mark learned to interpret some of Eliza's basic sign language. She was patient with his clumsy attempts, her silent laughter evident in the way her shoulders shook and her eyes crinkled at the corners. By their fourth date, Mark had downloaded a sign language app and was practicing daily. It felt important somehow, this effort to meet her in her world rather than always expecting her to accommodate his. Emma was curious about the woman her father kept seeing. Is she your girlfriend? She asked one evening as Mark practiced signing in front of the bathroom mirror. She's a friend, Mark replied carefully. Then why are you learning sign language? Because it's how she communicates. She can't hear or speak. Emma considered this. Like Ariel in The Little Mermaid? Before she got her voice back. Mark smiled. Sort of, except Eliza was born deaf. And she can't walk either. She uses a wheelchair. Emma's eyes widened. Can I meet her? Does she like octopuses too? Maybe someday. And yes, she knows a lot about octopuses. She illustrated a book about them. That sealed it for Emma. I want to meet her tomorrow. Mark laughed. Not tomorrow, kiddo. But soon, if things keep going well. That night, as he texted with Eliza, he mentioned Emma's interest in meeting her. Her response came quickly, asterisk I'd love to meet her whenever you're comfortable with that. No pressure, asterisk. Mark stared at the message, realizing that he was approaching a crossroads. Introducing Eliza to Emma would make this, whatever this was, more real. It would mean acknowledging that he was moving forward, that life after Sarah was taking a shape he never could have imagined. Are you still there? Eliza texted when he didn't respond. Asterisk yes, sorry. Just thinking. How about this weekend? There's a marine science center Emma's been wanting to visit. Would you like to join us? Asterisk. The three dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, asterisk I'd love that. But Mark, are you sure? Meeting your daughter is a big step, asterisk. He typed back, asterisk I'm not sure about anything these days. But I'd like you two to meet, asterisk. The Marine Science Center was crowded that Saturday, but the staff was accommodating with Eliza's wheelchair, offering them a private tour of the touch pools and aquarium exhibits. Emma was immediately drawn to Eliza, bombarding her with questions about octopuses and her illustrations. Eliza answered patiently, typing on her tablet when Emma's questions became too complex for the basic signs Mark had learned to interpret. By the time they reached the octopus exhibit, the highlight of the center, Emma was holding Eliza's hand and chattering excitedly. "Dad says octopuses can solve puzzles and open jars," Emma said, pressing her face against the glass as the creature inside unfurled its tentacles. Eliza nodded and typed, "They're incredibly intelligent. They can recognize individual humans and remember if someone was kind or unkind to them, Like elephants." Emma exclaimed. Exactly like elephants. They have excellent memories, Mark watched the interaction with a mixture of emotions. Relief that Emma seemed comfortable with Eliza. Happiness at seeing his daughter so engaged. And something deeper, more complicated, a sense that something important was happening, something he hadn't planned for but couldn't deny. As they left the center, Emma asked if Eliza could come over for dinner. "I want to show her my octopus collection," she explained. Mark looked at Eliza, who typed, "only if your dad is okay with it. I don't want to impose, Please, Dad?" Emma pleaded. Mark found himself nodding. "Sure, why not? I make a mean spaghetti and meatballs." Eliza smiled. "Sounds perfect." Dinner was a success. Emma proudly showed Eliza her collection of octopus toys, books, and drawings. Eliza, in turn, showed Emma some of her illustration techniques, guiding the girl's hand as they sketched together at the kitchen table. After Emma went to bed, Mark and Eliza sat in the living room, a comfortable silence between them. The house felt different with her there, warmer somehow, less empty. "Thank you for today," Mark said, signing the words he'd practiced. Emma had a great time. Eliza signed back, slowly enough for him to follow, "I had a great time too. She's a wonderful girl, She likes you," Mark said. "She doesn't warm up to people easily. Not since her mom died." Eliza reached for her tablet, "Children are more accepting than adults. They see people, not disabilities, I'm trying to see you that way too," Mark admitted. "But sometimes I still get caught up in the logistics, the wheelchair, the communication. I worry about saying or doing the wrong thing." "You're doing fine," Eliza typed. Better than most. "And I appreciate that you're learning to sign. That means a lot, Mark hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Doesn't it bother you? The way people treat you differently? The way they stare or avoid looking at you altogether?" Eliza considered the question, her fingers hovering over the tablet. Finally, she typed, "Of course it bothers me. Some days it makes me furious. But I can't change how people see me. I can only change how I respond to it, She continued typing, "Before my accident, I was like most people, uncomfortable around disability, not knowing what to say. Now I'm on the other side of that discomfort. It's taught me patience. And it's shown me who sees me as a whole person and who sees only what I can't do, Mark nodded slowly. "I want to be someone who sees all of you." Eliza's eyes met his, and she typed, "You're getting there. That's all anyone can ask for, As summer turned to fall, Eliza became a regular presence in Mark and Emma's lives. She helped Emma with her science projects, introduced her to new books, and even began teaching her sign language. Mark continued his own lessons, gradually becoming more fluent. Their relationship deepened, but physical intimacy remained a complicated territory. Mark was hesitant, unsure of Eliza's boundaries and his own feelings. Eliza, for her part, never pushed, allowing him to set the pace. One evening, after Emma had gone to a sleepover at a friend's house, Mark invited Eliza over for dinner. They cooked together, Eliza directing from her wheelchair as Mark followed her instructions for her grandmother's lasagna recipe. As they ate, Mark found himself watching her, the graceful movement of her hands as she signed, the expressiveness of her face, the way she navigated the world with such determination despite its obstacles. "What?" she signed when she caught him staring. "Nothing," he signed back. "Just thinking about how much has changed since that first dinner." "Good changes," she typed. "Unexpected changes," he replied. "But yes, good ones. You and Emma get along so well. And I." He trailed off, unsure how to express what he was feeling. The words seemed inadequate, trapped somewhere between gratitude and something deeper. Eliza waited, her eyes patient. When he didn't continue, she typed, "And you?" Mark took a deep breath. "And I'm starting to feel things I didn't think I'd feel again. After Sarah died, I shut that part of myself down. I had to focus on Emma, on keeping our lives together. There wasn't room for anything else." Eliza nodded, encouraging him to continue. "But being with you, it's different from what I had with Sarah. Not better or worse, just different. And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect you." Eliza's fingers moved across her tablet, "I didn't expect you either. Dating isn't easy for someone in my situation. Most men see the wheelchair and the tablet and decide it's too much work before they even know me, Their loss," Mark said simply. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Mark helped Eliza transfer from her wheelchair to the couch, an action that had become familiar but still required care and communication. As they sat together, the space between them seemed charged with unspoken questions. "Can I ask you something personal?" Mark said after a while. Eliza nodded. "After your accident, how did you find the strength to keep going? To rebuild your life?" She considered the question, then typed thoughtfully, "I didn't have a choice at first. I was in the hospital, then rehab. Everything was about survival and basic functions. It was only later, when I came home to an apartment I couldn't navigate in a life I couldn't recognize, that I had to make a conscious choice to live rather than just exist, She continued, "There were dark days. Many of them. Days when I couldn't see the point. But gradually, I started finding new ways to do the things I loved. I adapted my illustration techniques. I found online communities of deaf artists and people with spinal cord injuries. I learned that a different life doesn't have to be a lesser one, Mark absorbed her words, thinking about his own grief journey. "After Sarah died, I felt like I was just going through the motions for Emma's sake. It's only recently that I've started to feel like I'm living again, not just surviving. That's all any of us can do," Eliza typed. "Find our way back to living, whatever that looks like now." Their eyes met, and Mark felt something shift between them. Without overthinking, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when Eliza responded, her hand coming up to touch his face, the kiss deepened. When they finally pulled apart, Mark's heart was racing. "I'm sorry if that was." Eliza shook her head and typed quickly, "Don't apologize. I've been wanting you to do that for weeks, Mark laughed, relief and joy mingling. "Really? You could have given me a hint." "I thought I was being obvious," she typed, her eyes twinkling. "I guess I need to work on my flirting skills." They spent the rest of the evening talking and kissing, exploring this new dimension of their relationship. When it was time for Eliza to go home, Mark found himself reluctant to end the night. "Stay," he said impulsively. "Emma's not home. You could stay." Eliza's expression grew serious. She typed, "Are you sure? There are things you should know. About my body, about what I can and can't feel. About what intimacy looks like for me now, Mark nodded, understanding the weight of what she was saying. "I want to learn. If you're willing to teach me." That night marked another turning point in their relationship. There were awkward moments, adjustments, and new discoveries for both of them. But there was also tenderness, laughter, and a deepening connection that transcended the physical challenges. As they lay together afterward, Mark signed, "Thank you for trusting me." Eliza signed back, "Thank you for seeing me." The following months brought new challenges and adjustments. Mark's house needed modifications to accommodate Eliza's wheelchair. Emma had questions about the changing relationship between her father and Eliza. And there were still moments when Mark caught himself wondering what others thought when they saw him with Eliza, if they assumed he was her caretaker rather than her partner. But there were beautiful moments too. Emma learning to sign fluently, often faster than Mark. Eliza's illustrations beginning to feature a character who looked suspiciously like Emma. Family movie nights with descriptive audio and subtitles, all three of them huddled on the couch. 6 months after their first date, Mark took Eliza back to the restaurant where they'd met. As they finished their meal, he reached into his pocket and placed a small box on the table. Eliza's eyes widened. She looked from the box to Mark's face, a question in her expression. "It's not what you think," he said, signing simultaneously. "Open it." Inside was a key. Eliza looked up, confused. "It's a key to my house, our house, if you want it to be," Mark explained. "I've had the contractors finish the modifications. Wider doorways, accessible bathroom, ramps. Everything you'd need to live there comfortably." Eliza's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tablet. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" "Yes," Mark said. "Emma and I both want you there. We've talked about it, and she's excited. But I understand if it's too soon, or if you want to keep your independence." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. She typed, "It's not too soon. And I won't lose my independence by sharing my life with you. That's what I've learned from you and Emma, that connection doesn't diminish us. It makes us stronger, " She picked up the key, holding it tightly in her palm, then signed, "Yes. My answer is yes." Mark felt his own eyes growing wet. He leaned across the table and kissed her, not caring who was watching or what they might think. As they drove home that night, to what would soon be their home together, Mark thought about the strange path that had led him here. The grief that had nearly consumed him. The friends who had tricked him into a blind date with a woman they knew would challenge his preconceptions. The courage it had taken Eliza to show up that night, knowing she might face rejection or pity. "What are you thinking about?" Eliza signed when they stopped at a red light. "About how sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places," he signed back. "And how grateful I am that my friends tricked me." Eliza smiled, her eyes reflecting the streetlights. She signed, "Me too." The wedding was small, held in the backyard of their home the following spring. Emma served as both flower girl and ring bearer, proudly signing her part of the ceremony alongside the interpreter they'd hired for their guests. Mark's vows were delivered both verbally and in sign language, his hands moving confidently through the words he'd practiced for weeks. "Eliza, you came into my life when I thought the best parts of it were behind me. You showed me that love doesn't have to look or sound like anything I expected. You taught me to listen with more than my ears, to speak with more than my voice, and to see with more than my eyes. I promise to continue learning, to never stop trying to understand your world, and to build a life with you that honors both our strengths and challenges." Eliza's vows were signed, with the interpreter voicing them for the guests. "Mark, when we met, I was used to being defined by what I couldn't do. You saw what I could do, what I could be, what we could become together. You and Emma have given me a family I never thought I'd have. I promise to love you both with everything I am, to bring laughter and creativity into our home, and to never take for granted the gift of being truly seen and heard." As they exchanged rings, Emma stepped forward unexpectedly. She had prepared a surprise, a sign language poem she had created with help from Eliza's deaf friends. Her small hands moved gracefully through the signs, telling a story of 3 separate paths converging into one stronger road. There wasn't a dry eye in the gathering by the time she finished. Mark knelt and hugged his daughter, overwhelmed by her thoughtfulness and the depth of her acceptance of their new family. The reception that followed was a blend of deaf and hearing cultures, music for those who could hear it, vibrating dance floors for those who could feel it, and visual art projections for everyone to enjoy. Mark and Eliza had their first dance to a song that had been important to Mark and Sarah, a choice Eliza had suggested as a way to honor the love that had come before without diminishing what they had found together. As they moved across the dance floor, Mark guiding Eliza's wheelchair in a choreographed routine they had practiced for weeks, he leaned down and whispered in her ear, knowing she couldn't hear the words but wanting to say them anyway, "Thank you for showing me that love doesn't have to look like what I lost to still be beautiful." Eliza, reading his lips, signed back, "Thank you for being brave enough to try." 5 years later, their family had grown. They had adopted a deaf child, a 4-year-old boy named Leo who had been in the foster system for most of his life. Emma, now 15, had become fiercely protective of her little brother and was considering a career in either marine biology or deaf education. Their home was filled with a language of their own making, a blend of sign, speech, art, and the unspoken understanding that comes from truly seeing one another. It wasn't always easy. There were still days when Mark felt the weight of coordinating their different needs, when the logistics of their life together seemed overwhelming. But then there were moments like this one, a Sunday afternoon, the 4 of them in the backyard. Emma teaching Leo about the garden they had planted together. Eliza sketching the scene for her newest children's book. Mark watching them all, his heart full with the knowledge that family could be rebuilt, that love could find new expressions, that what might look broken to the outside world could be whole and beautiful in its own way. Eliza caught his eye from across the yard and signed, "What are you thinking about, with that look on your face?" Mark signed back, about how sometimes the things that shatter us are the same things that help us rebuild into something stronger. Eliza nodded, understanding. She had once told him about the Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, highlighting the breaks rather than hiding them. "We are all kintsugi," she had signed. "Our breaks make us more beautiful, not less." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their yard, Mark gathered his family for dinner. They sat around the table, hands moving in conversation, faces animated with expression, hearts connected in ways that transcended conventional communication. This was the message he wished he could share with his past self, the angry, grieving man who had walked into that restaurant years ago, ready to walk right back out when he saw Eliza waiting. Sometimes the most profound connections come when we're brave enough to move beyond our expectations, when we learn to listen with our hearts instead of our ears, when we find the courage to be broken open and rebuilt by love. And sometimes, the words that shatter us are the very ones that set us free. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the unexpected ways love can transform our lives. Remember, the most beautiful journeys often begin with a step we never planned to take.